Imagine, in the cold fog of the North Atlantic, the sound of oars blending with the rhythm of straining sails. Sleek, fast vessels cutting through the water, passing Greenland and steering toward a horizon no map fully understands. Now, place yourself in the position of the Norse seafarers. You approach a shoreline scented with forest and damp earth, and beneath your boots, instead of familiar stone, thick wet grass blankets the ground. You are neither in legend nor in a dream. This is North America, centuries before the name of Columbus was etched into the world's memory. aux Meadows is not merely a simple name on a map. It is a document that compels history to breathe again. The Norse turf houses, the remains of a smithy, ship rivets, and traces of labor and daily life, tell us that the Vikings truly reached this place, not for a symbolic historical cameo, but to establish a base, to test the limits of the known world, and perhaps to begin something larger. Yet the central question remains: if they arrived, why did they not stay? Why did their story shrink into a marginal chapter in the footnotes of history? And more importantly, what exactly does aux Meadows reveal about the capabilities, intentions, and ultimate fate of the Vikings in the far west? When we speak of Viking presence in North America, we are not merely discussing an intriguing historical anecdote. We are confronting the collapse of a long-standing intellectual framework. For years, the dominant narrative in public history maintained that sustained European contact with the American continent began in the late 15th century with the exploratory voyages of Spain and Portugal. aux Meadows demonstrated that Europeans set foot on this continent at least 5 centuries earlier, and this was not a fleeting landfall, but a presence marked by construction, craft, and production. The importance of this discovery lies in how it disrupts the illusion of linear history and reminds us that the past is a network of parallel endeavors, some enduring and transformative, others brief and fragile. Moreover, aux Meadows reshapes our relationship with narrative sources. The sagas, once dismissed as legend, become texts that, at least in part, draw from lived reality. From a methodological standpoint, the site stands as a classic example of how archaeology can correct and recalibrate historical narrative. The issue is not simply that the Vikings came, but rather how the knowledge of their presence redefines our understanding of the medieval world and the perceived boundaries of civilization. To understand how the Vikings reached North America, we must consider the true capacity of the Viking Age. The Norse were not merely warriors. They were seafarers, traders, settlers, and builders. From the late 8th century onward, Scandinavian maritime mobility expanded dramatically. The longship, with its intelligent design, light hull, shallow draft, and the ability to be propelled by both oar and sail, allowed navigation in both open ocean swells and shallow river systems. This technical advantage, combined with a culture of mobility and extensive kinship and trade networks, opened western routes one after another. First the northern British Isles, then Iceland, and eventually Greenland. Greenland in particular is pivotal. For the Norse colony, there faced resource limitations and required timber, metal, and trade goods. Within this context, going west was not a blind gamble. It was the logical extension of an exploratory economic continuum. When a society possesses generations of maritime experience, risk management, and adaptation to cold climates, reaching the shores of Newfoundland ceases to appear impossible. aux Meadows is thus the product of a mature, maritime civilization, not a historical accident. The sagas are not a camera that records reality without distortion. They are narrative constructs that weave truth, memory, and literary artistry together. Yet the Vinland sagas, particularly those that name Leif Erikson and other Greenlanders, kept alive for centuries a central question. Did the Norse truly reach lands beyond the ocean? These texts describe three types of terrain or experiences: a stony and icy land, a forested region, and finally a more fertile place, sometimes associated with grapes or distinctive natural resources. While details may be exaggerated or symbolic, the overall pattern aligns strikingly with North Atlantic geography. The discovery of aux Meadows shifted the status of the sagas from pure myth to critically evaluable source. Texts to be assessed through historiographical criteria, such as narrative layering, political motivations of family lineages, and the role of oral storytelling. The sagas are valuable because they reveal how the Norse themselves understood these voyages, as quests for resources, honor, and opportunity. Yet precision is essential here. Sagas without archaeological corroboration are insufficient, and archaeology without narrative context offers an incomplete picture. Reliable historical truth emerges at the intersection of these two domains. The discovery of aux Meadows reads like an adventure narrative in its own right, a blend of scholarly curiosity, engagement with medieval texts, and fieldwork conducted in a landscape where wind and rain resist easy progress. In the 1960s, researchers inspired by saga clues and local reports traveled to northern Newfoundland and encountered anomalies, turf-covered mounds, and structural patterns that differed from indigenous architecture and instead resembled Norse buildings in Iceland and Greenland. Excavations yielded remarkable results: turf-walled structures, a workshop area, and most crucially, evidence of ironworking. This was no longer conjecture. It was hard data, stratigraphy, artifact analysis, controlled excavation. A scholarly community long skeptical of Vinland narratives suddenly confronted a tangible pre-Columbian European site. The discovery not only gained widespread media attention, but also became a methodological touchstone in archaeology, a demonstration of how modest physical traces can reconstruct a substantial historical narrative. Located at the northern tip of Newfoundland, aux Meadows occupies a landscape shaped by persistent oceanic winds and cold, damp conditions. This climate made life arduous, yet it also contributed to the preservation of certain remains. The site is not merely a collection of grassy mounds. It is an organized complex of structures indicating deliberate planning. Several principal buildings conform to the Norse turf house model: thick sod walls, wooden framing, and subdivided interior spaces. Adjacent evidence of workshop activity underscores the site's operational character. This detail is critical. A brief stopover would not require such spatial organization or productive infrastructure. The geographic location is equally logical, close to maritime access, yet partially sheltered within the natural landscape. Today, the site is recognized as a landmark of archaeological significance, but more important than its designation is its message. This was a base, not necessarily a town, nor a large colony, but a node for testing, repair, provisioning, and perhaps strategic decision-making regarding further southern exploration. If we are to speak with certainty, we must rely on measurable, reproducible evidence. At aux Meadows, one of the most significant discoveries is evidence of ironworking, remains of a furnace or smithing area, along with slag, the byproduct of smelting or refining metal. This is vital because iron production was essential for ship rivets, tools, and repairs. Its presence indicates operational support activity. Structural patterns and artifacts align with Scandinavian material culture. Radiocarbon dating places the occupation in the late 10th to early 11th centuries CE, and some advanced analyses have suggested even more precise chronological markers. The convergence of human activity traces with reliable chronological data elevates the site from probability to historical fact. Thus, when we state that Vikings were present in North America, that claim rests on two pillars: the imprint of human hands in the soil and scientifically determined temporal evidence. Why undertake such a perilous voyage? The answer likely blends economic necessity, survival strategy, and opportunism. The Norse settlements in Greenland suffered from timber scarcity, while shipbuilding, construction, and heating all depended on wood. A forested western land presented a tangible incentive. Additional resources, furs, varied food supplies, tradable goods, offered commercial potential. Beyond economics, Norse culture valued prestige and lineage honor. Exploration could enhance the legitimacy and authority of local leaders. Yet the evidence suggests that aux Meadows functioned more as a temporary base than a permanent colony, a site for overwintering ship repair, resource collection, and logistical coordination. This pattern mirrors known Norse expansion elsewhere: initial small foothold, evaluation, then potential consolidation. In North America, however, the chain of expansion appears to have halted. A sensitive dimension of this narrative concerns interaction with indigenous peoples. The sagas refer to groups the Norse called skraelings, a term sometimes carrying pejorative undertones and reflecting significant cultural distance. Accounts describe both trade and conflict. Archaeology offers limited direct evidence of sustained contact, which may suggest brief encounters, undiscovered traces, or strategic avoidance. Logically, a small Norse group in unfamiliar territory, surrounded by indigenous communities with deeper environmental knowledge, would struggle to maintain long-term settlement without agreement or numerical advantage. Even if definitive evidence remains sparse, the possibility that tension and security risk contributed to withdrawal is entirely plausible. Exploration, even in remote frontiers, is inseparable from power dynamics. It is essential to distinguish between first arrival and largest historical impact. The Vikings reached North America, yet their voyage did not trigger expansive colonization or global transformation. By contrast, Columbus's 1492 voyage initiated interconnected systems of global trade, mass migration, colonization, and profound ecological and cultural shifts. Why the divergence? 15th century Europe possessed more centralized states, maritime investment, and imperial ambition. The Vikings operated through localized kinship networks, without comparable institutional backing. Scale, continuity of contact, and demographic weight all matter. Norse activity in Newfoundland remained small and regionally constrained. Without sustained links to the homeland, a distant base inevitably weakens. Thus, although chronologically earlier, the Viking venture lacked the structural momentum that later reshaped the globe. This helps explain why aux Meadows has remained underrepresented in mainstream historical consciousness. the discovery carries a broader message. History should not be reduced to single hero narratives. The concept of discovery itself is problematic when applied to a continent long inhabited by indigenous societies. Many historians now prefer terms such as contact or arrival. Even within European history, aux Meadows demonstrates that transatlantic encounters have a more complex prehistory. It also compels us to reconsider the Middle Ages, not as an era of stagnation and isolation, but as a period capable of managing long, hazardous maritime routes. Educationally and culturally, the site reminds us that history is not static. New evidence necessitates narrative revision. In that sense, aux Meadows is not merely a location. It is a corrective, a reminder that the past is larger than simplified versions handed down to us. Despite its importance, aux Meadows is not the conclusion of the story. It inaugurates further inquiry. Recent research employing refined environmental analysis, organic residue studies, and examination of trade patterns seeks to expand the picture of Norse voyages. A central debate concerns whether the site represents the sole North American foothold or a northern node within a broader network. Some scattered findings hint at deeper southern excursions, though interpretations remain contested. Scholars also debate the precise function of the site, ship repair hub, timber procurement center, seasonal trading post, or a combination thereof, and the duration of occupation. Modern historiography increasingly integrates archaeology, environmental science, geology, and data analysis to illuminate hidden layers of the past. Each new answer generates further questions. That is the scientific allure of this case. aux Meadows is a small dot on the map, yet it carries immense historical weight. Here, oral Norse traditions materialize as turf walls, a smithy hearth, and tangible tools. The site demonstrates that cultural memory can preserve strands of truth across centuries, but transforming that truth into reliable knowledge requires rigorous method. Modern history emerges at this intersection, neither blind faith in narrative nor wholesale dismissal of it. The Viking episode in North America also conveys a human lesson. Courage and capability do not guarantee permanence. They may have arrived, built, tested, and departed. And that departure is itself part of the truth. The world is filled with endeavors, whose traces are small, yet whose meaning is profound. When we ask why they did not remain, we are probing the fragility of human projects in the face of nature, distance, and cultural friction. aux Meadows teaches that history is not a catalogue of decisive victories. It is a record of attempts, some enduring, some fleeting, all worthy of understanding. If you have followed this narrative to this point, you now know that history is not merely what we have heard repeatedly. It is what we must continually re-examine. aux Meadows reminds us that even a remote patch of earth can overturn a widespread assumption. Now it is your turn. If you believe that discovery and being first are not always as straightforward as textbooks suggest, share your perspective in the comments. Do you think the Vikings might have remained in North America under slightly different circumstances? And if you would like future episodes to explore other astonishing cases of forgotten contacts, unknown sea routes, and medieval enigmas, subscribe to the channel and enable notifications so you do not miss a single installment. Share this video with a friend or colleague who loves history and unusual discoveries, because meaningful discussions begin when old narratives are challenged. Your engagement gives this journey purpose, and our voyage is only just beginning.